The courtroom buzzed with a quiet, uneasy energy as the heavy wooden doors creaked open. Everyone turned their heads. Karoline Levitt stepped inside, dressed in a simple navy suit. Her face was calm, her back straight, but her eyes held something deeper: focus, fear, and fire. At her side walked Bruno, a large German shepherd with a jagged scar running along his left side. The scar looked like it had a story of its own. Some in the crowd smirked. Others whispered, "A dog? Seriously? She's the White House press secretary, not a secret agent. She must be trying to make a scene." Karoline ignored them. She walked straight down the center aisle toward the witness stand, her heels tapping softly against the polished marble floor. Bruno stayed beside her, his steps quiet but firm. His ears were up, his body tense, alert, more like a soldier than a pet. At the front of the room, behind a tall bench, Judge Daniel Harper watched closely. He had seen hundreds of cases in his time, but something about this one felt different. He looked at Karoline, then at the dog, and finally at the man seated at the defense table, Victor Grayson. Grayson didn't look nervous. In fact, he looked relaxed. Too relaxed. He sat back in his chair with a small smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. His hands were folded neatly in front of him. Victor Grayson, age 50, former Pentagon intelligence analyst. Today he was on trial for allegedly selling U.S. military secrets to China. The evidence? Weak. The suspicion? Strong. Everyone knew something was wrong, but proving it was another matter. "Ms. Levitt," Judge Harper said, his voice deep and calm, "you may take the stand. I assume your companion is here for official reasons." Karoline gave a short nod. "Yes, Your Honor. He's trained to detect surveillance signals and foreign electronic codes. He's part of a classified federal program. I received special clearance to bring him." There were more whispers now, louder than before. "Judge," Harper tapped his gavel once, not angry, but firm. "The witness may proceed." Karoline stepped up to the stand and placed her hand on the Bible. She swore to tell the truth, the whole truth. Bruno stood beside her, still as stone. Then, just before she sat down, Karoline did something barely noticeable. She tapped her index and middle fingers twice against the wooden edge of the table. Tap, tap. Bruno's reaction was instant. His ears snapped forward. His body stiffened. A low growl rumbled from deep in his chest. A sound that wasn't loud, but made everyone freeze. Slowly, deliberately, Bruno turned his head and locked eyes with Victor Grayson. The room changed. The air felt heavier. The quiet was no longer casual. It was loaded. Bruno didn't bark or lunge. He just stood still, eyes burning into Grayson like he knew something no one else did. Grayson shifted slightly in his seat. His smile faded. "Is that dog looking at him?" Someone whispered from the gallery. Karoline didn't move. She stared straight ahead, her expression unreadable. But her hand was resting on the table, fingers still touching the spot where she had tapped. Judge Harper leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Ms. Levitt, what was that command?" "It was a signal," she said softly, "for him to assess, not to act. He's trained to react only when something feels wrong." The judge turned to Bruno. The dog's gaze had not moved. He was still focused entirely on Grayson, tense, unblinking. Grayson cleared his throat and tried to smirk again, but it came out awkward, forced. Judge Harper suddenly stood and raised his hand. "This court is recessed for 15 minutes. Bang! The gavel hit the block with a sharp crack. Gasps filled the room. Bruno's growl faded, but his posture remained, tense as Karoline gently tugged his leash and stepped down from the stand. As they walked past the defense table, Grayson didn't look at her. But Karoline looked straight at him. "And Bruno?" He growled once more, just low enough for only Grayson to hear. Outside the courtroom, reporters were already gathering, trying to understand what had just happened. Cameras zoomed in on Karoline as she stepped into the hallway, Bruno still glued to her side. "What just happened in there?" someone shouted. Karoline didn't answer. She knelt beside Bruno, running her hand along his back, and whispered just 2 words into his ear. "Good boy." Inside the courtroom, Judge Harper stayed seated. He didn't leave with the others. He stared at the empty chair where Karoline had just been. Something serious had happened. Something only she and that dog seemed to understand. And he knew this trial was about to take a turn no one expected. The hallway outside the courtroom was filled with reporters, buzzing with questions. Cameras flashed, voices rose, and confusion filled the air. But Karoline Leavitt didn't say a word. She stayed calm, her hand resting gently on Bruno's back. The German shepherd stood beside her like a statue, his eyes still alert, his body ready. Inside, the courtroom remained tense even after most people had stepped out. Judge Harper stayed in his seat, slowly turning a gold pen in his fingers. His thoughts were racing. In all his years on the bench, he had never seen a reaction like that. From a dog, from a witness, or from the accused. Something deep had stirred inside that room. And Bruno's reaction wasn't just an accident. It was trained, precise, purposeful. Harper leaned toward his clerk. "Get Agent Brooks in here. Now." Minutes later, FBI agent Ethan Brooks entered the room. He was tall, sharp-eyed, and quiet. A man who'd built his career on reading people and catching lies. Today he had seen something he didn't fully understand, and that made him nervous. "You saw the dog," Harper said. Brooks nodded. "Yes, sir." Bruno picked up something, no doubt in my mind. "On Grayson?" "Yes." "Was it visual? Scent? Audio?" Brooks shook his head. "Can't say for sure, but it was real. That wasn't a stage trick." Bruno locked onto something. The judge sighed and rubbed his forehead. "I need you to do a quiet scan. Backgrounds, phone activity, any contact with foreign handlers in the last 48 hours. Discreet. We can't let this turn into a circus." Brooks nodded and left the room. Back in the hallway, Karoline stood alone, away from the reporters. Her mother, Margaret Leavitt, approached slowly. She wore a soft gray coat and carried a tired expression. A woman who had lived through many storms and now watched her daughter walk through one of her own. "Are you all right?" Margaret asked gently, brushing a lock of hair from Karoline's face. Karoline gave a small nod, but didn't speak. She leaned against the wall, still holding Bruno's leash tightly. The courtroom might have been quiet, but inside her heart, it was chaos. Her fingers trembled slightly, remembering the signal she had sent. A move that could have backfired. But she knew Bruno, and she trusted him more than any person in that building. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A secure message lit up the screen. Encrypted message. Clearance level. Read from agent. Ethan Brooks to Karoline Leavitt. Subject urgent development. Text. Found something. Meet me in briefing room 2B. 15 mins, bring the dog. Karoline's eyes narrowed. She turned to her mother. "I need to go." Margaret hesitated. "Is this about the case?" Karoline nodded. "Something's happening, and it's bigger than just Victor Grayson." Inside briefing room 2B, deep within the courthouse security wing, Agent Brooks stood over a table covered in printed call logs, satellite images, and fragments of surveillance transcripts. When Karoline walked in with Bruno, he didn't even look up. He simply said, "You were right to bring him." Karoline approached slowly. "What did you find?" Brooks tapped a file folder. Grayson's defense claimed he hasn't had contact with foreign agents in over 6 months. But this shows a hidden meeting that happened just 4 days ago. No phone used, no email, just a physical drop at a park bench. He pulled out a photo. A grainy image from a park camera, showing Grayson talking to a man in a gray coat. No face, no name, but the timestamps didn't lie. Karoline stared at the photo, her mind racing. "That's why Bruno reacted," she whispered. "He recognized the chemical trail from the coat. They use it in low-tech message drops. It's designed to trigger alert dogs." Brooks raised an eyebrow. "You think he smelled it on Grayson?" "I think Bruno did more than smell it. I think he remembered it. And that scares me." Brooks looked down at Bruno, who stood near the door, still watching. "We need a warrant. We need to search Grayson's belongings, now." Karoline met his gaze. "And if we find anything, this trial explodes." Back in the courtroom, Judge Harper prepared to resume the session. The defense attorney, Thomas Reed, leaned toward Grayson with a forced smile. "Don't worry, this will pass. Dogs growl. People overreact. We stay calm." But Grayson didn't look calm anymore. He was sweating. His fingers drummed nervously on the table. Outside, Karoline stood near the courtroom doors, Bruno sitting patiently beside her. Her eyes were hard now, focused. The fear from earlier had transformed into resolve, because now she wasn't just a press secretary. She was the only person in that building with the key to unlocking a conspiracy no one else saw coming. And Bruno, the dog everyone laughed at, had just started something no one could stop. The courtroom doors creaked open as people filtered back in. The 15-minute recess was over, but something had shifted. The air felt heavier, like a thunderstorm waiting to break. Everyone took their seats, but there were no jokes this time. No smirks. No laughter about the dog. Judge Harper sat on the bench, eyes cold and calculating. Karoline entered quietly, Bruno once again by her side. His tail didn't wag. His ears were up, alert. He was a soldier now, not a pet. Victor Grayson looked different too. His once calm and smug face was tense. His fingers rubbed nervously along his tie. He knew something had changed, but he didn't know what. Prosecutor Anna Reynolds stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to request permission to recall Ms. Levitt to the stand." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Karoline walked forward and sat, Bruno settling beside her chair. "Ms. Levitt," Reynolds began, "you were brought in as a special witness regarding classified protocols. But earlier, during your silent signal to the dog, something unusual occurred. Could you explain?" Karoline hesitated, then looked directly at the judge. "I was trained under a special unit that works with canine intelligence. Bruno is not just any dog. He's trained to detect certain chemical residues, especially ones used in low-tech espionage. During the trial, I noticed something, a subtle movement in Mr. Grayson's jacket. It matched a behavioral pattern we studied. I gave Bruno a silent signal to confirm it. And his response?" Karoline nodded. "Immediate, focused, aggressive but controlled. That means he found what I suspected." The courtroom buzzed again. Defense attorney Thomas Reed stood up quickly. "Objection. This is speculation. We're allowing an animal's behavior to sway a federal trial? What's next? Trial by parrot." Some people chuckled nervously, but Judge Harper leaned forward. "Sit down, Mr. Reed." The room fell silent again. Reynolds continued. "Ms. Levitt, were you aware of any recent surveillance on Mr. Grayson?" Karoline replied carefully. "Not officially, but Agent Brooks discovered something just moments ago." She handed over a sealed folder. The judge opened it, eyes scanning the printed images. Grainy park footage, timestamps, a gray-coated man passing something to Grayson. The judge's jaw clenched. Reed stood again. "Your Honor, this is outside the scope of this trial." But Harper cut him off. "Sit down. Now." Karoline took a deep breath. "There's more. The chemical Brano detected is used to mark secure drop points. It can be applied to fabric, then activated by contact with a second material. It's odorless to humans, but to a trained canine, it's loud." The judge turned to Grayson. "Mr. Grayson, do you deny being in contact with anyone outside the country in the past week?" Grayson didn't speak. His hands clutched the edge of the defense table. "I remind you," Harper said, "you are under oath. Perjury will result in additional charges." Grayson finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "I want to speak to my attorney." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Back in the high observation row, Margaret Levitt squeezed her hands together, watching her daughter with a look of worry and pride. Karoline remained calm, but inside her thoughts were racing. This wasn't just about a court case anymore. Something larger was unfolding. Grayson wasn't working alone. He couldn't be. The way he moved, the way he reacted, it was the behavior of someone who believed he had backup, who believed someone bigger was protecting him. Suddenly, a low buzz came from the courtroom's side door. Agent Brooks stepped in, walked directly to the judge, and handed him a single sheet of paper. Harper read it, then stood. "Court is adjourned until further notice. Mr. Grayson is to be taken into federal custody for interrogation under Title 18, Section 793. Gasps filled the room. Reed jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, that's outrageous." But before he could finish, federal marshals entered and surrounded Grayson. The defendant didn't resist. He just stared at Karoline, eyes dark and empty. She met his gaze with steel in hers. As the courtroom emptied, Brooks walked over to Karoline and whispered, "There's a message coming in from Interpol. Looks like your instincts were right. Grayson's contact is tied to a deeper network. European intelligence flagged a similar chemical signal used in Berlin just last month." Karoline's voice was quiet. "This isn't over." "No," Brooks agreed. "It's just the beginning." And behind them, Brano sat tall and still, his mission far from complete. The holding cell beneath the courthouse was cold and silent, lit only by the dull yellow of overhead lights. Victor Grayson sat alone, handcuffed to the table, his suit rumpled, his forehead damp with sweat. The arrogance he wore in the courtroom was gone now. In its place was a deep, gnawing fear. Across from him, Agent Ethan Brooks entered the room carrying a folder and a digital recorder. His eyes met Grayson's, unreadable but sharp. "No lawyer this time?" Grayson muttered. "You requested silence," Brooks said calmly. "But you should know. This isn't a casual chat. You're being watched. Everything's recorded." He placed the recorder on the table and clicked it on. "This is Special Agent Ethan Brooks, questioning Victor Allen Grayson under federal hold, date June 14th, time 2:32 p.m. Grayson sighed, leaning back. "So what is this? Some kind of pressure game?" "No," Brooks said, sliding the folder. "Open. This is evidence, and an opportunity." Inside the folder were photos, surveillance stills, the park meeting, the unidentified man in gray, a package exchanged. Then a zoomed-in photo of Grayson entering a luxury hotel in Geneva 2 months ago, with a known Chinese diplomat arriving less than 20 minutes later. Grayson looked away. "We know the signal was used on you," Brooks said. "Your jacket sleeve lit up under the scanner." Brano confirmed it. "Your dog can't testify," Grayson shot back. "No," Brooks agreed, "but a chemical trace can." He leaned forward. "Interpol sent this." He pulled out a document. "A similar marker was used in Berlin on a Russian asset. 2 weeks later, a NATO leak crippled our cyber operations. The same agent, your contact, was there too. Grayson's lips tightened. Victor, Brooks continued, lowering his voice, you're not just a leaker anymore. You're now linked to an international sabotage network. People died because of those leaks. Silence stretched. Then Grayson spoke, voice bitter. I gave them information, yes, but I didn't know how far it would go. Brooks stared at him. You knew exactly what you were doing, but you didn't know who was watching. Grayson looked up, eyes sharp now. You don't get it. There's a list. Brooks blinked. A list? Names, Grayson whispered. People who were paid to stay quiet. Some of them still in power. They made me do this. I had no choice. Brooks's breath caught. Do you have proof? Grayson nodded slowly. It's encrypted, on a secure drive. Not here. Not in D.C. Where? Grayson leaned in. You get me immunity. I give you everything. Upstairs, in a private chamber off the courtroom, Judge Harper stood by the window, arms crossed. Karoline entered quietly. Agent Brooks says Grayson is talking, she said. Harper didn't turn. I heard. He mentioned a list, she continued. A blackmail operation. Officials in our own agencies. Harper finally faced her. You trust him? No, Karoline said, but I trust Bruno. Harper allowed himself a small, grim smile. Outside the courthouse, media vans had gathered, like vultures. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted. The story was leaking fast. Former Pentagon official arrested in espionage case. But no one knew yet about the deeper game. Inside, Karoline met with Agent Brooks in the hallway. He looked exhausted but focused. We need to verify the drive, he said. If Grayson's telling the truth, this could be the largest security breach since the Cold War. Karoline's eyes narrowed. And if he's lying? Brooks glanced toward the courtroom. Then he's stalling for someone else to clean up. Just then, Bruno barked. A low warning sound. Karoline turned to him. What is it, boy? Bruno's head swiveled toward the stairwell. A tall man in a dark coat had just entered. His face was hidden, his walk too calm. Brooks reacted first. Get security, now! But the man had already disappeared into the crowd. Karoline looked at Bruno. Track. Without hesitation, Bruno shot forward, weaving through reporters, agents, and staff. The chase had begun. And somewhere deep inside federal records, a secret list of names waited to be exposed, names that had stayed hidden for years, but not for much longer. The hallway burst into chaos. Federal agents shouted, reporters ducked, and cameras turned sharply as Bruno lunged through the crowd, his powerful body cutting through like a blade. Karoline ran just behind him, heart pounding in her chest. Agent Ethan Brooks barked orders into his earpiece. Lock down the east stairwell. Block the exits, now. The man in the dark coat was fast, too fast. He slipped through a side door leading to the emergency stairwell, but Bruno was already there, paws thundering against the marble floor. Karoline didn't hesitate. She followed. Behind her, 2 U.S. Marshals joined the pursuit. They thundered, down 3 flights of stairs before bursting into the underground garage. It was nearly empty. Dim lights flickered overhead. The man paused just long enough to glance over his shoulder, and then he ran again. Bruno snarled. But just as the agents turned the corner, the man spun and pointed a small black device toward Bruno. A sharp, high-pitched sound burst through the air. Bruno yelped and stumbled, ears pinned back. Sound weapon! Karoline shouted, crouching beside her dog. He's trying to disable him! Brooks raised his weapon, but the man vanished between 2 parked vans. A siren whooped. Backup arrived. Within seconds, the lot was sealed. The device the man dropped, still buzzing on the floor, was scooped up by forensic techs. Karoline comforted Bruno, running her hand along his back. "He's okay," she said, but her voice trembled. Brooks knelt beside them. "That wasn't just a runner. That was a professional, and he knew Bruno's training." Karoline's eyes went cold, which means he had inside knowledge. Back upstairs, Judge Harper was on a secure call. The case was no longer just about Grayson. It was about the network, a web of people operating across borders, institutions, and governments. Names that were never supposed to surface, until now. Karoline sat alone in the witness chamber later that evening. The adrenaline had worn off, and her body felt heavy. Bruno lay beside her, resting his head on her feet. Her mother, Margaret Levitt, entered with coffee. "You need to sleep." Karoline shook her head. "Can't." Margaret looked at her daughter for a long time. "Why did you really bring Bruno today?" Karolina hesitated. "Because I didn't trust the courtroom. I needed someone who sees without politics, without bias." "And what did he see?" Karoline's jaw clenched. "The truth. Across town, Grayson was being moved under heavy guard. Agent Brooks sat with him inside the armored van, reviewing the first decrypted files from the drive Grayson had mentioned. What they found was chilling. Emails, wire transfers, meeting logs. But most disturbing, direct links between foreign intelligence officers and 3 high-level American officials, including a former Homeland Security director. "This isn't just spying," Brooks muttered. "This is policy manipulation. Years of it." Grayson nodded slowly. "Now you know why I broke. They were going to erase me. I had to make myself valuable to someone." "You put lives at risk," Brooks snapped. "I know," Grayson said quietly. "But I'm not the biggest threat anymore." Brooks looked up. "Then who is?" Grayson turned his head slowly. "Someone you've already seen. Someone in that courtroom." Back at the courthouse, Karoline stared out the window as rain began to fall. Bruno lifted his head again, ears twitching. "What is it now?" she whispered. But Bruno didn't growl this time. He simply watched the hallway door, and that's when Karoline knew. They weren't finished yet. Something darker was still coming, something bigger than any of them expected. The storm outside was getting worse. Rain slapped against the windows of the courthouse like bullets. Inside, everything had gone quiet. Too quiet. Karoline Leavitt sat in the judge's private conference room with Agent Ethan Brooks, Bruno at her feet. On the table between them was a printed copy of the decrypted files taken from Victor Grayson's hidden drive. Names, dates, transfer amounts. Shadowy meeting locations. And something even more chilling. A coded file labeled Red Echo. Brooks leaned forward. "We need to decode this one now. Every second counts." Karoline studied the file. "It's military. The language. It's embedded with old Cold War encryption." Bruno suddenly let out a low growl. Both of them looked up. The conference room door creaked open, slowly. Judge Harper entered, face pale, coat dripping, wet. His eyes flicked to the document on the table. "You opened it," he said softly. Brooks nodded. "We had to. It's worse than we thought. These aren't just backdoor deals. These are strategic alterations of U.S. policy, driven by foreign influence." Judge Harper didn't speak for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, hands behind his back. "When I first joined the bench," he said, voice low, "I thought the courtroom was the safest place in this country. Now I'm not so sure." Karoline stood. "Sir, there's something else you need to know." She handed him a small envelope, marked classified, that Bruno had uncovered in the stairwell, hidden behind a vent. Inside was a tiny flash drive. Brooks had scanned it minutes earlier. It wasn't part of Grayson's file. It was newer, more dangerous. It contained video surveillance from the night Grayson allegedly met the Chinese operatives. But in the video, Grayson wasn't alone. A woman was with him, wearing a government ID badge, and her face was unmistakable. It was Senator Evelyn Carr, the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Judge Harper dropped the envelope. "That's impossible," he said. "No, sir," Brooks replied. "She was in the room. She made the trade. Grayson was just the courier." A sharp knock interrupted the silence. An aide rushed in. "Sir, there's movement outside the building." Brooks stood instantly. "What kind of movement?" "Black vans, no plates, 5 of them, surrounding all exits." Karoline's heart dropped. "They're coming," she whispered. "They're trying to silence us before this leaks." Harper picked up the flash drive. "We need to move now." Suddenly, the lights flickered, then died. The room was swallowed in darkness. Karoline grabbed Bruno's collar. Brooks pulled his sidearm. Emergency lights clicked on, red, dim, flickering. Karoline reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small transmitter. "We built a secure uplink just in case something like this ever happened." She tapped it twice and held it close to her lips. "Command Echo, this is Press 1. We are under breach protocol. Releasing package Liberty Flame. Repeat." "Releasing Liberty Flame." Brooks blinked. "What did you just do?" Karoline looked up. "I just sent every file, every name, every piece of this story to 6 international media networks, including Al Jazeera, CNN, and BBC. It's out of our hands now." Brooks smiled faintly. "Good." But before they could move, boom! A small explosion rocked the building. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere, glass shattered. They ran. Karoline, Harper, Brooks, and Bruno bolted down the hallway, turning sharply toward the underground records vault. They had only one chance left, to retrieve a physical copy of the testimony Karoline had prepared. It wasn't just about the files. It was about telling the story. In court. Officially. Publicly. As they reached the vault, the air was thick with smoke. 2 masked men appeared from the side hallway, armed, wearing tactical gear. Bruno launched forward, teeth bared. Gunfire erupted. Brooks returned fire, pushing Karoline behind a steel cabinet. "Go!" he shouted. "Take the judge and get the file." Karoline didn't argue. She grabbed Harper's arm and pulled him into the archive room. Inside, rows of locked drawers stretched endlessly. She punched in her code. Drawer 14C popped open. Inside, a single red folder marked Levitt testimony, eyes only. She grabbed it and turned. Another masked figure stood in the doorway. He raised his weapon, but Bruno slammed into him from the side, knocking him to the floor. Karoline didn't stop. She ran. They burst into the emergency stairwell, alarms blaring above them. Sirens screamed outside. Finally, daylight. As they reached the exit, a SWAT team surrounded the outer doors. A firm voice called out, "Hands up! Federal Task Force!" Karoline held up the folder. "I'm with you," she said. "We've got the truth, and we're ready to speak." Bruno stood tall beside her, blood on his fur, eyes locked forward, waiting for the final command. The courtroom was silent again. Not from fear, but from what was coming next. Karoline Levitt stood in the witness box, her green eyes focused, steady. Bruno sat beside her, alert, calm, and scarred from the chaos they had survived just hours before. On the other side of the room, federal agents lined the walls. Cameras flashed as journalists scribbled furiously. The world was watching. The judge's gavel struck once. "Proceed," Judge Harper said, his voice steady but hard. "The witness may present her full testimony." Karoline took a deep breath. "Thank you, Your Honor." She looked straight ahead. "My name is Karoline Levitt. I serve as the White House press secretary. Today, I am not speaking for the administration. I am speaking for the truth." The air tightened. She opened the red folder marked Eyes Only and pulled out her handwritten notes. Her voice was firm, unwavering. For months, I suspected that Victor Grayson was not working alone. Every piece of data pointed to something bigger, something darker. I didn't come to testify because of politics. I came because the system was infected, and nobody inside dared say it. Gasps echoed. The judge didn't stop her. "In late August," she continued, "I intercepted communications involving not only Grayson, but a sitting U.S. Senator, Evelyn Carr. They weren't just leaking classified information. They were coordinating the sabotage of our national defense policies for the benefit of foreign powers." She placed a series of printed messages on the evidence table. Agents immediately confirmed their authenticity. "And the file named Red, Echo," she added, holding up a USB drive, "contained not only financial records, but transcripts of conversations implicating Carr, Grayson, and 3 unidentified officials in long-term intelligence manipulation." Across the courtroom, Senator Carr sat frozen. Her legal team whispered urgently, but she didn't move. Her face was pale. Her career was unraveling, live on every major news network. Karoline wasn't finished. "Grayson wasn't the mastermind," she said, eyes narrowing. "He was the bait. The real operation, what we now know as Red Echo, was designed to discredit the Trump administration's military alliances and weaken national defenses while enriching a hidden circle of power brokers." She turned to Judge Harper. "And the moment I gave Bruno the signal, he confirmed there was still a transmitter in this courtroom, hidden inside the defense table." Judge Harper stood slowly. "Search it." 2 agents rushed forward and began to dismantle the defense table. Within seconds, one of them held up a small device no larger than a coin. "A live transmitter," the agent confirmed. "Still running." The courtroom erupted in noise. Karoline remained still. She bent down beside Bruno and whispered, "Good boy." Bruno's tail thumped once against the floor. Judge Harper banged his gavel. "Order! Order!" The room fell silent again. Then his voice rang out. "Based on the testimony of Ms. Levitt and the evidence presented, I am halting all current proceedings in this courtroom. A special investigative grand jury will be convened immediately." He paused, looking directly at Carr. "All involved parties are to be taken into custody for national security review." Carr stood up, shaking her head. "This is madness. You don't know what you're doing." But her voice was drowned out by the sound of federal agents closing in. She was handcuffed. So was Grayson. Karoline closed the folder and stepped down from the witness stand. Her hands were steady now. No more trembling. She had done it. Outside, the skies had cleared. A large crowd had gathered at the courthouse steps. Reporters pushed toward the barricades, calling her name. She stopped at the top of the stairs, Bruno sitting loyally at her side. A CNN reporter shouted, "Ms. Levitt, do you fear retaliation from those still in power?" Karoline answered, calmly, "Fear is a luxury I stopped affording the day I chose truth." Another journalist asked, "What's next for you?" She looked toward the horizon, thoughtful. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but the people now know what was hiding behind their flags. And I'll keep speaking until the last shadow is brought into the light." Bruno barked once, as if in agreement, Then Karoline walked down the steps, past the cameras, through the crowd. Not a politician, not a press secretary, but something far more powerful. A witness, a survivor, and a signal. Because sometimes in a courtroom full of silence, one command, one whisper to a dog, could unravel an empire built on lies.